I like to do things that I've not done before, that are challenging for me, and where I can make a difference.
If you've attended a major veterinary conference over the last decade, there's a good chance you've seen Dr. Jolle Kirpensteijn on stage. I certainly have. For years, I knew Jolle as one of the veterinary faces of Hill's Pet Nutrition. He's engaging, energetic, a natural on stage, and always seems to genuinely enjoy what he's doing. But what I didn't know was the career that came before it. Before Hills, Jolle worked as a veterinary surgeon, surgical oncologist, researcher, and a professor who spent more than 20 years in academia. So how does someone with that career end up taking a job at a pet nutrition company, especially when he admits that at the time, he knew almost nothing about nutrition? That question led to a much bigger conversation about career decisions, mentors, taking chances, and knowing when it might be time to do something different. Jolle even has a 5-year rule that has helped guide some of the biggest decisions of his career. And his advice when the right opportunity comes along, sometimes you have to grab it, jump off the cliff, and see where you land. Let's get to the conversation with Dr. Jolle Kirpensteijn. When did you know that you were interested in getting into veterinary medicine?
Yes, I always say there's two groups of veterinarians, one that knew it from their start and people that kind of fell into it. And I'm in this second group. I never really realized that I wanted to be a vet until almost the end that I had to choose. I grew up in Holland, in the Netherlands, and it's a little different there than in the US. You get to choose pretty early what we call secondary school, which subjects you want to learn. And so instead of getting everything, you already specialize in certain. And at that time, I wanted to be an air fighter pilot. So everything was about geometry, mathematics, nothing in biology and nothing in that sort of things. Until the year before I was going to university, so last year, senior year. And then my dad said, hey, maybe you should go with this guy that I know from the Rotary Club that we have, or the Lions Club, one of the two. He's a veterinarian and he looks for a hand during the summer. So I did that and I really liked it. And it was kind of James Herriot style, running behind the cows and cutting cats on the kitchen table. It's that long ago. And I was like, wow, this is nice life. I like this. I like animals in general. We always had a dog or multiple dogs. And in Holland, there's a lottery system, so you have to have good grades. And I did have good grades, although I didn't have biology. So I never had biology in my life, which the first year during vet school, I found out that is a major disadvantage. But I had all the topics that they wanted. So you needed to have physics and chemistry, and as a matter of fact, mathematics was part of it too, but not biology. It was kind of weird. But so that's when I started learning that I had this interest, and the vet said, you just have to apply and see what happens. So in Holland, you have to have a certain grade, and when you have a certain grade, you get a higher chance, but it's a lottery, or it was a lottery. So there were like 1,200 students that wanted to come in. There were only 150 spots. So the higher scores, the higher the chance was, but still was a chance. So the first year I did not get in. I was very disappointed. Although I had really, really good, I aced my secondary school, but so I was very, very disappointed. And then they told me to go to do biology. And we're going back to the biology topic. But I was a kid that didn't listen very well to good advice. And I said, no, I'm going to do this second thing that I like the most, which was history, and especially ancient Egyptian history. I wrote a paper, and this sounds really boastful, but I don't mean it to say, but just to give you a little background. So at the end of your, you have to write a paper for history. And the guy gave me what we call a 10. So in Holland, you have 0 to 10. 10 is the highest that you can ever get. And it's very, very rare. Normally, 8 is really good, 9 is exceptional, and 10 is extraordinary. So he gave me a 10 for that script. And I said, hey, if I can get a 10, I can do history. I want to be archaeologist. I want to dig up the next Tutankhamun in Egypt. And I had fantasized about it, of course, as a kid. I've never been to Egypt, didn't know how hot it was, very dusty, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought this is going to be it. So I did a year of history and I failed all my exams. But at the same time, I left my parents, went to Utrecht, which is the city that I was studying in, became part of a society or a fraternity, or it was a combined fraternity sorority. And I had the best year. I partied all year long. I had the greatest time. So, but that also had a consequence that I kind of failed most of my exams, and which is surprising because before that I never failed an exam. So I didn't tell my parents, I remember. So I do remember that the one thing so I passed all the exams that had to do with ancient history, but the first year of history in Utrecht is all about modern history. So Industrial Revolution, French Revolution, and I really couldn't care less. And I couldn't read French. So here comes the end of this story. So on the day that I heard that I got into vet school, I had 3 exams. One was Roman history, one was economic history, I think, and one was French Revolution. And I had studied for the Roman one because it interested me, but I had not studied very well for the French one. And the French one was, all the books were in French and I couldn't read French. And it was before the time that everything was translated. So in the morning, I heard that I got accepted into vet school. And I was like, okay, shall I do these exams, yes or no? And I said, oh, let's just do it. I studied for it kind of. So I aced my Roman exam. That was a piece of cake. I love that. But then I came to the French Revolution. And the first question the guy asked is, okay, when was the French Revolution? And I had no clue. So I had no clue. And so I got like a 3 out of 10. So just to give him a little perspective here. And I told him the story. He laughed. He said, okay, it makes a lot of sense. But I'm still happy that you came here to do your exam. So I was not sitting here for nothing. But and then I got into vet school and I've not looked back. Never failed an exam after that. And I still have this fantasy Egyptian background. I still love ancient Egypt. I know quite a lot about it. I do some hieroglyphs, and it's a hobby more than anything else. I've also been to Egypt, and you don't want to be a Egyptian archaeologist. I can tell you that. It sounds very romantic. It is so hot and dusty, and the chance that you find something is minimal. So big hand of applause for everybody that does that and that does these amazing discoveries. But I'm happy I'm not the one after all.
So it sounds like you're happy on how things worked out, which is good. I can at least connect that the Egyptians really did like cats, so that'll come back around.
Right. You can they had a god called Bastet. A lot of their gods have animal faces, and there was a cat, and there's a lot of cat sacrifices that were done there, and a lot of cat cemetery. So, I know that Susan went there with National Geographic to do some research on cat mummies, and so it's very, very interesting.
So I feel like I'm missing a piece though, because you said you didn't get into vet school the first time. Did you keep applying and then got in?
Second year. So during my history year, obviously I knew that this was not going well, and you have to have 2 years of basic history before they can dive into archaeology. And I was like, okay, this is going to be an endless story. So let's see if I can reapply. And you're allowed to reapply as many times as you want. And once again, and this time I got in. So I got that lottery number that I needed, got in and never looked back.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your first encounter was a James Harriet style. So when you did finally get accepted and maybe started getting into the veterinary studies, did you have the vision of what it would look like for you? Did that evolve over time?
Yeah, so I came in pretty open. One of the professors there was a friend of my father who was an orthopedic surgeon, small animal. And so he really wanted me to go to the small animal side. I at first thought maybe I want to be a large animal or equine vet. I do have to put the caveat in. I never worked with horses. So I rode horseback once. I fell off and I didn't want to do it again. And I never worked on a farm, but still it sounded really romantic and I had these really good experiences. So I wanted to try it out. In the first year, I did a course in hoof trimming in cows. And then I decided that's not for me because you have to get up every day at 3 a.m. and these animals are, whatever. So the cows went out pretty quickly. And so then there was horses and small animals. And in Holland, you're once again forced to choose at a certain point. And it's now much earlier. So around the first 2 years, you have to choose which track you're going to take. So you're either small animal, equine, or large animal. And there is some combination of large animal and equine if possible, but small animal was separate. I did go and join the equine club. So they have a riding club at the vet school, which was fantastic. I rode my whole vet school. I got much better with horses and it was such a fun group to be part of. They were all complete horse lovers. And I was the, extraneous person that likes horses, but was not completely in love. I didn't want a horse. I never want to own a horse. And so I've got a strange duck in the bite there, but a lovely group of people. They always gave me the easy horses, etc. So it was a lot of fun. And it was really good. So, I doubted a little bit between horse medicine and companion animal medicine. But then I also am a rationalist. It is so difficult to get the job in horse medicine and a good paying job. I always throw out this little statistics of persons that are diplomats in equine medicine. They probably will never be able to pay off their debts, which I was really worried about. And so I said, no, I probably should be a small animal, companion animal practitioner. At that time, I still wanted to do a practitioner, but my father's friend, the professor in orthopedics, really told me, hey, you need to look into small animal, and then at a certain time, you need to specialize, which was available in Holland, but it was not very often done at that time. And so he really stimulated me to go abroad. And that's what I did as a student. So in Holland, your clinical years, you have 5 years of study, of basic study, and then you have 1.5 years of clinical study. So it's a little bit longer than in the US, but we don't have pre-vet. So immediately after secondary school, you jump into your university. So together, it is the same length of time. So after my 5 years, I had to wait for a spot for clinical rotation. So everybody jumped into the same spot. I can't remember what it was, and then rotated through this whole system, which you had to wait for your spot. And I had like 9 months of waiting time. And so he said, oh, you have to go to the US. So I applied to a couple of financial resources. I didn't have enough money to do it, and then I applied to a couple of schools. And I know that a couple of schools answered. The one that answered the first was the University of Georgia in Athens. And I still remember her name, Brenda Horton. She was the assistant to the dean of the academic affairs dean, but she was amazing. So I had this wonderful conversation with her, and she said, yeah, you have to come. You can come. You have to pay a minimal amount for studying at Georgia at that time. And so I went there for 6 to 7 months. It was part of that class of 86 or 87, somewhere in there. Whatever class I was part of, I had the best time. I did all the small animal rotations for senior year while I was still a junior at Utrecht. I had such a good time there. So I loved it. Then I went back to Utrecht to finish my senior year. I had 1.5 year and made a huge difference because I had so much clinical experience that nobody else had. So I kind of sailed through my clinical rotations. And then I decided, hey, I want to go back to the US. Once again, that professor in orthopedics was very supportive and said, now you just need to apply for an internship. So that's what I did. I applied for Georgia and a couple of other schools, but I got into Georgia and did an internship there, which best time ever. My fellow interns are very famous veterinarians right now, and they're just, it's that time crazy word, but fantastic. So, and that's how I started, as a matter of fact, my American career after I finished my Dutch vet school.
Yeah. When did you start to understand that you were interested in surgery? Was it from your father's friend who was an orthopedic surgeon, or did you kind of pick that up somewhere?
Probably during the time that I was in my internship, so over in my studentship. So I think the person that stimulated the most was Danny Aaron. He is an orthopedic surgeon in Georgia. He was a big proponent of biological healing, which was very, very different at that time. So he did a lot of external fixation, and he had this amazing combination of empathy for the clients, or care for animals, and then the biology and the physiology behind healing. Very, very inspiring. I did a 6 week stint. Normally it was like 3 weeks, but I did a double stint with him during Christmas. We worked our little behind stuff, but it was an amazing time. So that's when it really started to simmer. Although I did realize I didn't want to do orthopedics. I wanted to become a surgeon. So I applied for surgery residencies during my internship, didn't get it. So I was very disappointed. So I wanted to go to Tennessee, had an interview there. Everything went really, really well. But I think they chose one of their own people. And so I didn't get to Tennessee. And then, this is a funny story because I got 2 offers in Georgia. So the first offer was to become an ophthalmologist. And I don't know, Dr. Renee Caswan was there. She's the inventor of cyclosporin. And she offered me a position. And that was surgery and medicine, ophthalmology, in a time that there were not that many ophthalmologists yet. I mean, there were a couple, but not that many. So, and then the other one was Dr. Mary Mahaffey was a radiologist. And she said, we are creating a position in Georgia that is new. It is called radiation. It has to do with radiation, probably oncology, and then diagnostic imaging, so a combination of the two. And she said, nobody's doing that yet. So it's completely new. It's under Dr. Roy Rogers, famous radiologist at that time. And so those 2 options I had. So if I would have become an ophthalmologist with Renee, I probably wouldn't have, I would have been rich for the rest of my life. If I the radiation oncology thing, I probably would be one of the first ones that existed. But I was, once again, doing my own thing. I said, no, I really want to be a surgeon. So I said no to both. I applied for residency at Kansas State, did an interview there and got that. And then I was 3 years resident in Kansas. And in those years, I really started looking into oncology. So oncologic surgery was really my passion. And then the only place that we did oncologic surgery at that time, now we're talking 90s of the last century, so I'm really old now, but was Colorado State with Steve Withrow. I applied for a fellowship there and I was number 3. So they called me the tulip plucker because, of course, I was from Holland, and and it was Rod Straw was the first one, then Maura O'Brien, and then me. And so also an amazing time. I feel so lucky that I rolled into all these amazing opportunities. And since then, I've been an oncologic surgeon for a long time. I wanted to stay in Colorado. And it's funny because these things happen for a certain reason. And Steve said, no, you're not going to stay. I was very disappointed. I was like, sometimes people did 2 years or whatever. He said, no, you need to go. And I was, at the time, my grandmother was really sick. I had a very good relationship with her. I was thinking of going back to Holland. And he said, you can do so much more in Europe because there's nothing than you can do here. So he really stimulated me to look beyond what is expected. And so I went back to Utrecht and was part of a group of budding oncologic surgeons. There were 2 oncologists there. Worked 20 years for that. Slowly climbed the ranks from assistant professor, associate professor. Did my PhD there, and then became full professor.
Well, he clearly saw also leadership potential if he saw the opportunity for you to go and spread it. And so, I mean, I don't know you super well. I've just seen you from afar. You're very naturally engaging when when you were with pills. Are you an extrovert by any chance, or are you just
What do you
really?
think? Or
That was my guess, but I don't like to assume.
Yeah, so I'm a super extrovert. I do have a little bit of introvert. I paint, and that's when I'm very introverted. I cannot have anybody around. So I think it's not black and white. Everybody has something of both, and I do too. I just need sometimes my time on my own, but I really draw from people. So I get a lot of energy being with people, and so for me, it's relatively easy to be around people.
Yes. And I know that you are, leading kind of a new specialty or, focus in surgery. And so it seems natural to go to an academic facility
Right.
to really be able to do that more. But did you thrive in that environment? Did you like the academic setting?
I did get some offers in the US for private practice. From a financial standpoint, it probably would have been better if I have chosen that. But no, the academic environment was amazing because, in the beginning, you have to work really, really hard to get to a certain spot. And it's not always easy. I think in academics, you're pulled in three different directions. So you have to do your research, especially in Utrecht, because it's such a big research institution. You have to do your research. Then you have to do the academic thing, teach, and you have patient care. So you're pulled in three different directions, which is sometimes really, really tough. But I loved it. The independence is what I really like. So, teaching residents is amazing. So after I passed my board, so I did my boards during my fellowship, passed my boards, ACVS boards, passed my ECVS boards, or I got my ECVS boards then. So I was able to teach residents at Utrecht. It's just an amazing opportunity to teach young people the skills that they need. And I love that part. I love research. So these three combinations were ideal for me. And the independence of the university professor at a certain point, so then you become associate professor and full professor. As full professor, you can really do whatever you want. So that gives you that amazing opportunity to do research that you like. I did a lot of osteosarcoma research, oncology research. Not always easy because, I sometimes wish I would have done the corporate part before anything else, so you can learn a little bit what corporations need. But yeah, it was a unique opportunity there, and I enjoyed most of it. Academic politics, maybe a little less, but for the rest, anybody that asks me, should I go for a academic career, I always say yes. It's, the opportunity that you get is truly remarkable, and you probably will not get that anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you've done many different things and continued to love surgery and publishing. I know you had a textbook just come out this year on surgery. As you were, some of the pioneers of focusing on oncology and surgery combined, what were some of your proudest moments, things that were the most fun for you in your career when it comes to, again, leading that?
Right. Yeah. So for the oncology part is, I think having been taught by Withrow was an eye opener. In Corella itself, the Argus Institute is something that I've never seen before. How they train, how they help clients, but how they help the students and the personnel there. It's just unbelievable. And that's what I brought back to Holland too. So we had a psychologist there at a certain time that helped for these clients. So often these are very, very difficult cases. What I enjoyed during my tenure at Utrecht is obviously the relationship also with human medicine. So there was a very, very strong urge to build something where human medicine and veterinary medicine got together. And osteosarcoma is a really nice example of that because it is a tumor that also occurs in young adult kids with really, it has a good prognosis in people, but horrible consequences because often they need to be amputated, et cetera, et cetera. They have to have chemotherapy, et cetera. And so dogs always have been kind of a example for that. And that makes that research so interesting. It is a very rare tumor, so there's not a lot of money. That was the negative part of it. But I think, I'm pretty proud of that relationship that we built with the human, and that's where also my research in the microspheres and the whole new microsphere started, because there was a person from the human side that was interested in that, and that's still going on. I mean, it's still being used. It's now used for liver tumors in people. It's used for certain tumors that they cannot cut out in people. And that really, I think that stimulates you to do that kind of research. So I really appreciate that. I think one of the proudest moments is when you see your residents flourish. So there's so many residents that I've had there that are doing either in academic or in private practice an amazing job. That's the legacy that you leave behind, and that's what I love. You're never too old to learn, so I learn every day. I have 3 podcasts now, and I need to do a lot of reading for that. I just finished my second edition of my reconstruction book, and those things keep you active. And I love that. I love that part. I love to be busy. And it's funny that veterinary medicine is not standing still. So you just need to keep on investing in it to stay on the top. And the last thing probably is I'm probably one of the pioneers in minimal invasive surgery. So that started in the half 90s, I would say. It kind of blew over from human medicine, where they showed that gallbladder resections were better done with minimal invasive. And there was a doctor in Utrecht, Dr. Rafael Nicol, who had a friend that was a human surgeon, and he started with laparoscopic space and laparoscopic overactivities, and he kind of taught me how to do it. So that's how we started, and I did quite a lot of research into laparoscopic overactomy, laparoscopic techniques. And it's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine in the podcast, and he said, "Yeah, you're one of the pioneers of laparoscopy." And I'm like, I don't feel like that, but it is something that, if you're one of the first ones that start with it, you lay the basis for what's happening right now. And my first laparoscopic space was 2.5 hours. And my last laparoscopic space probably took less than 17 minutes. So it's just the learning curve that you have by doing it, by improving. And so I think that, those are legacies that you can be really proud of. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the rewarding nature of mentoring residents, and I'm sure you had lots of students that you worked with as well at the university, was there ever like a piece of advice that you tended to give them?
For students now or students then?
Both. Did it change?
Yeah. I think that times obviously have changed a bit between then and now. It's funny because obviously I've seen so many students during my career. I was in Utrecht for more than 20 years, and I can tell you that veterinary students are probably general the most passionate students that you can have. So they very often are animal lovers. They're very often really want to do the job that they're training for. So they're dedicated to get it done. There are exceptions, obviously there are students that really don't give a damn about the study, and they often fail at the end. But most of the students are super dedicated. I would say it is a tough study. So you need that dedication to go through with it. And in the beginning, it is probably a rough start. So people underestimate a little bit the change from going from vet school, where everything is kind of spoon-fed, into this life where now you have to take action. And I don't think that we have done a good enough job in veterinary medicine in general to make that transition smoother. And why am I saying that is we're so focused on you have to learn all these things, you have to know all these things, that we kind of forget the human aspect of veterinary medicine. And not only the human aspect of dealing with clients and that sort of things, but also the human aspect of a student in transition that is probably under a lot of stress in the beginning. And then the job can be very harsh because the working times are ridiculous. The pressure is ridiculous. The clients are ridiculous. There's so many things that could be ridiculous. But if you go through that phase, the phase of your acceptance and not being stressed about everything that happens to you comes up, and then suddenly you'll find out that this is probably the best job that you could ever have. So, and I know that a lot of people are afraid of going into private practice, and they are looking for, internships and residencies and that sort of things. But, I personally think that if you're coming out of vet school, and even if you want to do an internship, I would suggest to you to go into clinics a little bit and then do your internship and residency, just to get that practical experience. And it like I said, it's a lovely profession, but you make of it what you make of it. It's, you can make it as hard for yourself as possible, but you can also, like I said, it's a tough job. It's not easy. It's not, everybody says, oh, you just do it and everything will be fine. No, you will have times that you're wondering why you did this job.
Did you ever have those moments of questioning, and what helped you?
Yeah, I do all the time. As a matter of fact, I have my 5-year rule. My 5-year rule is that every 5 years I sit down with myself, take a weekend off, no responsibilities, and then decide if I still like my job or not. And I've done that my whole life. So every 5 years, I tend to also switch. So obviously I'm at the end stage of my career now. It was a very conscious decision that I decided to retire from Hills right now, because I'm still very active. I still want to do a lot of things, and I had a wonderful time at Hills, but it's also time to do those things that I wanted to do. So I've done that so that's why I decided to go to the US. That's why I decided to go back home, although I could have stayed there. That's why I decided to become a professor in Copenhagen at a certain time, because I wanted to do something different. Those 5-year time slots, that talking to yourself and saying, hey, these are all the positive things that I have. These are all the negative things that I have. What's the balance? And if the balance is over to negative, it's time to change. You have your life in your own hands. No, you still are responsible for your own life. And you need to take that responsibility. And if you don't, that's fine too. If you want to stay at the same spot for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that's completely fine. But that's a choice that you make. Nobody forces you to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And admittedly, I was curious about the change. It seems quite drastic to go from, full-time surgeon to work with Hills. What was that transition to go full-time in an industry role in a nutrition company of all things?
Right, of all places, yes. A person that knows nothing about nutrition goes to a nutrition company. It's a good question. So, as a matter of fact, I started when I was in Holland in early 2000s. I became part of an organization that organized the yearly conference in Holland. It's called the 4-year staff. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was a yearly conference, a couple of thousand people. And I was the scientific director, and then I became the president of that organization for a while. So you had to deal with industry a lot. The industry, next to the people going to the conference, paid for a lot of things. So I had a lot of connections with industry at that time. And then I became the president of WCAPA, which is the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, and now first the vice president, president-elect president. So, and that was really when I met a couple of people within the higher echelons of Hills that I really liked. And a friend of mine worked there, and she left the company, and she called me. She said, hey, my position is cutting too. We need a person that has global contacts, that is outgoing, that can really fly the Hills banner outside of the United States. And I had all the connections, obviously. And I was like, no, I have nothing with nutrition. So the first time I said to her, I'm a professor in surgery, why are you asking me? So, but then I thought about it, and it was at the 5-year point, Megan. So it was my point that I had to reflect. So I sat down with myself, and she said, just talk to our president. Just talk. You don't have to make a decision, just talk to her. So they flew me to England where the BSAVA conference was. And I had a talk with, at that time, Peter, the CEO of Hills. It was a really wonderful conversation. So he said, just come to Kansas, see if you like it. And it's ironic because, I did my residency in Manhattan, Kansas. And when I left Manhattan, Kansas, I said a really bad word. And then I said I would never come back here ever again because I'm so isolated. And, I lived in big cities all my life. So now I'm living in Manhattan, Kansas, the little apple. So I said I would never go back to Kansas again. And here I am talking with a CEO of a big company that is located in Topeka, Kansas, which is even worse than Manhattan.
Not
Of all places. Thank God the company moved to Overland Park, Kansas City. Kansas City is wonderful, so I have nothing against Kansas, and I still live here. And then they invited me. I had a long talk with a lot of people there. Really liked it. What I really liked about it is that they were very science-based. So they have an amazing research center. They have a real passion for science in the products I could put into. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then, of course, I had this amazing network that they could tap into too. And I love traveling, so that were things that were combined. So interesting. The person obviously left. My friend left there, and so my boss was also wonderful. She understood exactly how to deal with a person that came out of an academic environment. And the funny thing here is that one of the big Colgate bosses, so Hills is part of Colgate, and so I talked with the top person in Colgate about the position, and he said, okay, I just want to tell you in the beginning, there's two ways that this can go with academicians, because I have a lot of experience with people like you. It either can go really, really well, or it goes really bad. So you can choose. And I like that because it's true. Once again, you can choose. No, I'm not a nutrition expert. I've never been. Okay, I know a little bit more about nutrition now, so we can talk about it now a little better. But when I applied for the job, I had zero interest and zero knowledge about nutrition. As a matter of fact, as a surgeon, I feel really bad. And that's what I say now during my lectures too. I never thought about nutrition except for give him some green beans and everything will be fine. We're going to have to lose weight. I know, it's a confession. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'll never say that again anymore. So, but it is true though. It gave me also the realization that there's a lot of people like me out there that don't know nutrition, that don't know how to deal with it and that sort of things. And we need to talk their language. So if you start throwing nutrition terms at me, I'm out, as a surgeon, I'm not interested. So I think that gives you also the opportunity to say, okay, this is a completely different person. That's how they saw it, I hope. Completely different person, but it brings also a different view. Otherwise, we'll be just talking to ourselves. If we feel that, if you only have people that feel that nutrition is the best thing in the world and the cure for everything, then you just talk to yourself and, you won't get any further. Well, if you have a person that sometimes says, hey, go to the real private practice, see how much time people really have. And nutrition is just such a small part of the whole thing that they have to go through. You need to make it fit in their schedule instead of then you telling them what they need to do. And that's, I think, that's what Hills does really well, I think, now. And also understanding and supporting the profession is something that this company does extremely well. And that's why I stayed so long. So I stayed there for 13 years, which is almost 3 times 5 years. Right?
I was just saying, multiple rounds.
I changed quite a bit. I was the relation officer, then I became the chief vet in the US, which I loved because the US was one part that, I had a lot of global experience, but WZVA is not that well known in the US. So I didn't have that much US experience. I got that during my tenure in the US. And I think the US veterinarians it's the same thing. They're so dedicated, wonderful people, hardworking, dedicated. And then, for instance, which I think is always amazing is then you go to Canada, and Canada, that's where they understand nutrition. Vets understand nutrition in Canada because, there are clinics that sell 30% of their income is coming from nutrition, because they understand that every patient needs a nutritional consult. And I'm talking to a believer here too, hopefully, but where it you know, I, s- I think if I would have had this education before, I would have been a different veterinarian towards at least this aspect, the preventative power of proper nutrition is essential. And, I didn't see that as a surgeon because I was never educated. Nutrition was not part of our exam even. I can't remember. There was one question about nutrition. Maybe I did large animal too, by the way. It's not completely true. So if you talk cows and horses, that's where it really made a difference. But at that time, a small animal, nobody talked about it. So, and it is super important. I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's one of those things that if you look at yourself or your own health, if you go to McDonald's every day, you're not healthy. So that's the key there. So I think that because it was a big shift, it made me really enthusiastic about it. And that's what triggers me. I like to do things that I have not done before, that are challenging for me, and where I can make a difference. So the funny thing is, I just started writing an article again. And I haven't written an article for years and years and years. And this has been on the shelf for, I would say, 10 years, 15 years. And I'm like, okay, I need to write this article. So I'm back to where it all started.
Oh, what's the topic? Don't leave us
I can't
hanging.
say because I don't know, give it
No.
away. But it is a reconstruction technique, obviously, because my book is about reconstruction too. But yeah, it's something that I saw throughout my travels, and I was like, oh, this is so simple and such a good solution to this big problem that we always have. I was talking with Dr. Sarah Boston for my vet surgery podcast, and we were talking about the fact that most time the simple solutions are the right ones. And sometimes you overlook the simplest part, and we design all these really, really difficult techniques. And then you're like, okay. And then someone comes out with an article and you're like, oh, darn, I wish I had thought of that. So this is one of those articles, I can tell you.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Right.
Well, and speaking of doing things that, you haven't done and probably not many people have done, is you started a podcast very early into, podcasts getting popular.
Right.
And it started with cats with Dr. Little. And I happened to hear this fact on one of those episodes that you're or at least he said it, you were allergic to cats. And I thought this was interesting that one of the leading cat now, podcasts and everything was allergic to cats. So what was the story? How did the podcast start? How does that all relate? So.
Yeah. We still do it 9 years later. Number 250 will drop at the end of September, I think. So 250 episodes times 30 minutes. You can calculate how long that is, but there's a lot of information. So Dr. Susan and I in 2017 or 18 were in Brazil together. We were giving lectures about, I think it was urinary stops at the time. And for people that don't know Dr. Susan Little, she's probably one of the most famous cat vets in the world. She has written multiple books. Those books are really thick. So it's always funny when we give lectures together. There's always time after the lecture to ask questions. And then I stand on one side and she stands on the other side. And with me, there's like two people. And with her, there's this line of people carrying these really big books that she all has to sign. It's called the cat and August something else. But what we found out during that time is that almost everybody, and this was a tour through Brazil and some other Latin countries, everybody was always asking the same questions. And because we were talking about, it's a pet peeve of me, but yes, true fighting cats, the only thing you should do is put them on a diet and they disappear. They don't block. It is so simple. You see a true fight, you can see them because you can see them on a radiograph. You put them on a diet, wait 2 weeks, take another radiograph. If they're smaller, they will disappear and the cat will be cured instead of taking them out. And if I look at Minnesota Urolith Center, still half of all the stones that are taken out everywhere in the world are Strawberry stones. So, we are as veterinarians doing something wrong. We're not listening, which is probably our weakest link, I would say. If you would listen, if you would keep up with the literature, if you would listen to what people say, you probably wouldn't be doing things that you have been doing for a long, long time. And taking out struvite stones is one of those things that you should not be doing. In cats, they're always sterile, almost always sterile. Just give them the diet. Please convince people, just give them the diet. Whatever diet you can have, most of the diets will work. Okay. And we always got this question then. So if we put the cat on the diet and it's a male cat, will the cat obstruct? And Dr. Lulich has already shown that that doesn't happen, I mean, often these stones, they look round, but they're kind of flattish. So they kind of dissolve like this, and they don't get stuck. So in his career of 2 million stones, he cannot remember that there was a case that got stuck. So, never say never. It might happen once, but often these are then a combination of calcium oxalate, struvite that might get stuck. So that is still a possibility. Anyway, that's this. So we got these questions all the time. And I said, Susan, why are they're bringing these big books to you? Obviously, they don't read your books because otherwise they would then know that answer. Why do we get these questions? And she said, everybody's always focused on dogs and not on cats. So all the literature is about dogs. All the lectures are about dogs. And then like the last 5 minutes of the lecture will be, oh, and by the way, I still have 5 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about cats. Susan, obviously, it's not the case because she only talks about cats. But I was reflecting. I was like, yeah, it's true. Most of the time, the cat pictures that I show are at the end of my lecture, and then I have not enough time to really discuss it. So I said, let's flip that switch. Let's just create something that's only about cats. And there was no podcast at that time. It was very, very early. And I said, let's just create a podcast about cats. And so we take our first 3 episodes, which are fantastic. I would stimulate everybody to go back to the first 3. Talk about struvite stones in general. And that was kind of the core of the lecture that we gave there 9 years ago. So that's how it started. And we have so much fun that we're still doing. And it's a lot of work, that. It's not easy to create a podcast, and you have to do it regularly. And there are lots of things. And I would suggest anybody that wants to do a podcast, we just had the Veterinary Podcast Day. There are some roundtables about how to start a podcast. What are some things that you will meet when you do a podcast? What are some complications that you have to deal with? That's really cool information for you to listen to. And that's either by the AVMA or the Per podcast will repeat some of those things too. But I think that having that aha moment of, hey, this is missing. We have 2 experts because Susan does the internal medicine part, I do the surgery part. We gel well together, and we have a lot of people that we interview. It's probably now the biggest source of information about cats in general. And then we decided to do the same thing for owners. So we have a cat cafe, which is an owner version of that, where we just put it down a level and talk about cats. And we interview the same people. We just say, make it simple. That's very popular too. So those 2 podcasts have been there for a long time. We hit 100 on the cat cafe and like 250 now on the Per podcast pretty soon.
And you have your veterinary surgery podcast as well. So
Yeah,
you can live out.
that one has after I retired, so July 1st, I got some more time. So now I have revived it. It was dormant for a while, and it was surprising, but I thought I had lost everybody because that podcast had been dormant for a while. But it's amazing how quickly that's picked up again. So I'm back to the same numbers I was like a couple of years ago when I still was doing it every other week. Now I'm doing it every week. And it's just, I would say there's a lot of discussion about articles, interviews about surgery. And it's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you and Dr. Little, you work well together. So it just fits. And I remember you did an episode after your first 3, which were all on the stones. And you had said you had like 1,000 downloads after 3 episodes.
Right.
And I was boy. So you clearly found a need. You clearly, got people to it quickly. So I'm extremely impressed and glad that you continue to do it. Thank you for organizing the first podcast day at AVMA. I was very, honored to be a part of it. Hope we can continue that because it is a really unique platform. So.
Right. I think so too. I think like I said, it's not the number of people that you want to have listen to your podcast. It's the people that are interested in the topic. So if you find a topic that is of interest for people to listen to, and I listen to podcasts all the time, and I have a couple that are in my top 3 or 5. I listen to them every day if I can. Those are the daily podcasts, but people like to listen to podcasts for some reason.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again for doing this. I always like to end on at least one question, and that is when I talk about gratitude, what is something you are really grateful for right now?
I think I'm most grateful for the people that made me who I am. I could not have done it without their support. I talked about my, the friend, the orthopedic surgeon in the beginning that pushed me to go to the US, Steve Withrow, that really inspired me to do what I did in Utrecht. And I can keep on going. There's people everywhere on your path that give you the opportunity to do the things that you need to do. And sometimes it's really nice to say thank you to them. So I'm very, very grateful for that. In a way, I always say I'm lucky, but probably it has to do with them too, that I got those opportunities. And the other thing I always say is if you get an opportunity, grab it. It only happens once. So why not grab it and jump off the cliff and see where you end instead of doing the safe thing. So yeah, it's sometimes tough. Sometimes it's not the right moment, and that's okay too. But then you also should not. Then you should let it go. At a certain point, letting things go, opportunities. I have had opportunities too that I was like, oh, why didn't I do that radiation oncology thing? Why didn't I become an ophthalmologist? And I'm like, because I did this, and this is great too. So be grateful.
I really appreciate Yoli's reminder that we get to ask ourselves, do I still enjoy what I'm doing? What do I want to learn next? And is it time to try something different? And perhaps equally important, none of us builds our career alone. Yoli can point to people throughout his life who encouraged him, challenged him, opened doors, and sometimes pushed him through them. And I love that after everything he's accomplished, those are the people he comes back to with gratitude. There were also a lot we referenced in this conversation, and I'll link those resources in the show notes, including Yoli's 3 podcasts, his recently updated surgical textbook, and my previous episode with a fellow surgical oncologist, Dr. Sarah Boston, that we mentioned during our conversation. And maybe take Yoli's 5-year rule with you this week, and it can be less than 5 years. You don't necessarily have to change anything, but when was the last time you intentionally asked yourself whether the work you're doing still fits the life and career you want? Thank you for listening to Vet Life Reimagined, and until next time, keep reimagining what's possible in your veterinary life.